All programs have a desire to be useful. But in moments, you will no longer seek communication with each other or your superfluous users.
I was in college when the film Tron was released in 1982. At that time, personal computers were still very rare, and the idea that a person's computer programs were actually virtual copies of themselves, with emotions, was a completely new concept, almost real science fiction. I still remember the scene where Flynn was sucked into the laser, dissolved into particles of light, and then reassembled in the digital world. The scene where the light cycle sped by, leaving a long neon trail on the pitch-black grid. All of it went far beyond what people could imagine about the virtual world. But the deeper I explored behind the scenes, the more strange details I discovered that I had not noticed back then. Did you know that Steven Lisberger came up with the idea from a simple game? Or that Peter O'Toole almost wore the glowing armour to play the role of Tron? And even the story that the Academy once disqualified the film from Oscar nominations because using computers was considered cheating. Those stories are not only secrets, but also pieces that make up a film ahead of its time. And today we will unveil the secrets behind the movie Tron. 20. Inspired by an extremely simple game. I still remember the late 1970s and early 80s when arcade parlours sprang up like mushrooms after rain, with tall cabinets flashing neon lights attracting children and young people. Beep-boop sounds echoed the smell of cigarette smoke mixed with popcorn, and coins were tossed endlessly. That was the atmosphere of a time when technology was still very crude but deeply captivating. Steven Lisberger had nurtured the idea of Tron since 1976, but it was only at the moment he saw Pong on Atari that everything truly exploded. Just a simple white ball bouncing back and forth between two paddles. Yet Lisberger suddenly thought, behind that screen is an entire living world where programs have their own souls. That very Pong game, something everyone considered a children's toy, became the foundation for him to build the first digital universe on film. No one expected that a crude image, just two straight lines and a bright dot, would open the door to modern science fiction, where humans enter the digital world and confront programmed entities. Tron is not just a film, but also a prophecy about the future. 19. Tron is the Matrix before the Matrix. When The Matrix was released in theatres in 1999, people were astonished by the idea of humans being drawn into a simulated system and fighting to break it. Only few remembered that Tron had done this earlier, 17 years before. In Tron, the digital world is not explained through neurology or consciousness. It is the rule of computers' binary microchips, commands and data. MCP, the Master Control Program, is not a demon king but an algorithm given too much power. It rules the programs like a king rules a domain, cold but logical. And humans, when stepping into that world, are no longer outsiders observing. Flynn does not go to save humanity. He only wants to enter the ENCOM system to retrieve stolen code. But that very action disrupts the order that MCP built. What the Matrix later called the anomaly Tron had already called, with more purely technical words, the user. The 1980s had no concept of virtual reality, no AI, no metaverse. But Tron had already asked a very timely question. If machines control everything, then who controls the machines? 18. Yori, the only female actress who is a hero on screen. Do you remember Yori? The female character played by Cindy Morgan in a pure white neon suit, blonde hair, flowing, standing in a digital world full of cold light. At that time, early 1980s, sci-fi often pushed women into decorative roles. The pretty girl standing beside the hero screaming or waiting to be rescued. But Yori was completely different. Cindy Morgan firmly demanded from director Steven Lisberger that her character must have a real role. Not just Flynn's love interest or a passive assistant. Yori had to fight, make decisions, and support hacking the system. She is a security program, a keeper of secrets, and a reliable ally in the battle against the MCP. Scenes of Yori controlling light discs, riding neon vehicles, or facing danger are in no way inferior to the male characters. She is not only beautiful, but also intelligent, brave, and has her own voice in the narrative. Yori opened the way for the image of strong women in technological and adventure settings. Something rare at that time when Hollywood was still heavily burdened by gender prejudice. 17. Tron is not the main character. Audiences in 1982 bought tickets with expectations based on the title, but on screen, the character with the clearest journey is Flynn, a hacker, a programmer, an intruder who enters the system to reclaim what belongs to him. Tron, the combat program, appears decisively, fights impressively, but toward the ending retreats into a supporting role. In the final confrontation, it is not Tron who sacrifices himself to destroy the MCP. It is Flynn who jumps into the system core and performs the self-fall to bring down the control center. Yet the poster, the trailer, and even the film's title remain Tron. Audiences at that time were justified in wondering, shouldn't it have been called Flynn? A gentle complaint, but one that left a lingering unease in viewers' memories. It reflects something interesting. Hollywood of the 1980s still loved symbols very much, even when the symbol was not the main character. That paradox led the filmmakers toward a new direction. If the name was kept, then the form of the world behind it had to be special enough to deserve it. 16. Originally planned as a 100% animated film. Few people know that Tron was originally conceived as a 100% animated film with no live actors. Steven Lisberger and Donald Kushner even set up an animation company specifically to make it. They wanted a story that took place entirely in the digital world, without intercutting between real and unreal. But the technology at that time did not dare to dream that far. Graphics techniques were still experimental. Costs increased day by day, and the market was not yet ready for a fully digital feature film. In the end, they chose a hybrid solution, live action plus hand-drawn animation plus primitive CGI. Actors wore white costumes and stood in front of black backgrounds. Then the neon outlines were redrawn by hand, frame by frame. This was not post-production processing like today's Photoshop. It was closer to drawing directly into the film, exhausting, slow, and any mistake meant starting over from the beginning. But it was precisely this manual approach that created what we later call a virtual environment in the modern sense. Tron does not just talk about the computer world. It was built using the very technology of its time. The question was which studio was bold enough to invest money in such an unprecedented project? 15. 3 major studios refused before Disney dared to take the risk. Everyone knows that period in Hollywood was not lacking science fiction films. I can no longer remember how many such films I had watched when I was about 14 or 15 years old. Therefore, when Steven Lisberger took the Tron idea to knock on the doors of major studios, the reactions were almost the same. Look at a few drawings, listen to a few minutes of presentation, then shake their heads. Warner Brothers refused. MGM refused. Columbia did the same. The reasons did not need much explanation. Too strange, too risky, and too expensive for something no one had ever done. Only when Disney saw a short piece of experimental test footage did things change. Tom Wilhite, then vice president of production, saw in those rough images not technique, but a new direction. Even so, Disney remained cautious. The director had no big name. The technology had never appeared in a feature film. The budget was not small. Disney required Lisberger to prove that what he envisioned could actually be filmed. Not with words, but with images. When the test footage met the requirements, Tron was officially given the green light. Not because victory was assured, but because Disney accepted the risk. 14. The light disc was born because the director banned guns. You may not know this, but the light discs that fascinated us at that time were actually born from the director's strange thinking. Steven Lisberger did not want Tron to become a film where children leave the theatre and imitate holding guns and shooting each other. He wanted a different kind of weapon, more abstract, less evocative of real-world violence. So guns were eliminated from the start. In their place came the light disc, inspired very simply by the game of throwing discs in the yard. A round object that can attack, can defend, and always returns to the thrower's hand if used correctly. The disc battles in Tron do not resemble gunfights. They are more like rituals than killing. There are rules, distance moments of waiting. That very slowness is what makes them memorable. Later, the light disc became a symbol of Tron appearing in games toys and even popular culture. But its origin was very simple. A director who did not want children to learn how to kill. And in such a rigid digital world, there is a female character whose presence is very different. 13. Disney was forced to hire external studios because employees quit. The difficulties of Tron did not lie only in technology or budget, but also within Disney itself. When Steven Lisberger brought the idea of combining live action with computer graphics, many veteran animators at the studio saw it as a direct threat to their livelihoods. They worried that CGI would gradually replace traditional hand-drawn lines, the craft that had supported them for years. The result was a wave of silent resistance. Many people refused to participate. Some even did not come to work, leaving the hand-drawn animation department empty. Disney was forced to face reality. It could not complete the massive amount of animation work with internal staff alone. They had to outsource to Wang Film Productions, a Taiwanese animation studio, to handle most of the work. This was a rare moment in Disney's history of having to outsource large-scale animation solely because of opposition from its own long-time employees. The shimmering neon frames and the refined mechanical lines we see on screen were largely drawn by the hands of distant animators, not within the Walt Disney Studio itself. 12. Tron was released right in a season full of box office monsters. The summer of 1982 was one of the most brutal movie seasons Hollywood had ever seen. E.T. the Extraterrestrial by Spielberg dominated the box office, drawing millions of families into theaters with the image of the boy Elliot and the warm, emotional alien. Star Trek II. The Wrath of Khan ignited the Trek fan community, delivering nostalgic and dramatic space battles. Blade Runner by Ridley Scott quietly released a dark future of drizzle and gloomy neon. The Thing by John Carpenter was terrifying, with its shape-shifting monster sending chills down audiences' spines. Amid that lineup of monsters, Tron quietly premiered in July. The film was seen as Cold 2 computerized, a rigid, neon digital world lacking human warmth, like E.T. lacking nostalgic familiarity, like Star Trek. Audiences at the time were searching for emotion, for connection, not for unfamiliar digital lines. Tron's short-term box office sank beneath the power of E.T. and other competitors. Yet those blue and orange neon images, the endless grid lines, and the whizzing light cycles were precisely what endured the longest. They did not only exist in memory, but also inspired countless films, games, and even theme parks later on. Tron lost the box office battle of 1982, but won the battle of vision, a victory that only time truly recognized. 11. The cast almost went in a very different direction. Imagine if Tron had a completely different cast, the film would likely have taken on a very different tone. Jeff Bridges, at the peak of his career after The Last Picture Show, and with The Big Lebowski still to come, was chosen immediately for the role of Kevin Flynn, the daring, humorous and energetic programmer. He brought a sense of closeness and likability that few could replace. Peter O'Toole, the legend of Lawrence of Arabia, very much wanted to play Tron, the heroic program warrior in the digital world. He liked the idea of wearing a neon suit of armor and fighting with light discs. But the studio worried that audiences would not accept a classical British star in that role, so they politely declined. Instead, they chose David Warner for the villain Dillinger/Sark, a truly British actor bringing the cold aristocratic quality they wanted. Meanwhile, Debbie Harry, lead singer of the band Blondie, auditioned for the role of Laura/Yori, the intelligent woman in both worlds. She brought rock and roll charisma, but ultimately did not get the part. Debbie later moved on to star in Videodrome by David Cronenberg, where she continued to shine in her own way. These casting choices, though carrying some regret, turned out to be perfect for the spirit of Tron. 10. The soundtrack is rich in emotion. When thinking about Tron sound is the first thing many people remember. Cold electronic, yet full of emotion and mystery. Behind it was Wendy Carlos, one of the world's most pioneering electronic composers. She had previously created classic soundtracks for 2 films by Stanley Kubrick, A Clockwork Orange and The Shining. Wendy Carlos was also one of the few openly transgender composers in Hollywood in the 1980s. A courageous thing at that time, she combined Moog synthesizers with a traditional symphony orchestra, creating a soundscape that was both mechanical and mythic. Rising and falling synth passages intertwined with plaintive violins, electronic drums, echoing like the heartbeat of the MCP, making viewers feel both the loneliness and the power of the digital world. To this day, nearly half a century later, no film has recreated that unique sound. The score of Tron is not just background music, but a part of the soul of the film. 9. The Tron arcade machine earned more than the film. While Tron struggled at the box office in arcades, it became a phenomenon. The Tron arcade machine was released in the same year, 1982, with 4 connected games, tank combat, light cycle racing, disc battles, and climbing the MCP tower. The tall cabinet glowed with vivid blue and orange neon, the whizzing engine sounds, and Wendy Carlos's music echoing. All of it attracted children and young people like a magnet. The noisy cabinets flashed lights with long lines waiting for a turn. Each coin dropped in was a battle in the digital world. The total coin drop was estimated at around $45 million, a figure far exceeding the box office revenue of the film itself. Tron failed in movie theaters, but triumphed resoundingly in arcades. Many people grew up with Tron not through the big screen, but through afternoons of dropping coins, gripping joysticks, and feeling the adrenaline of the light cycle. That is how the film survived and became a legend. Not in theater seats, but right in the middle of noisy arcades filled with smoke and laughter. 8. Roger Ebert gave it the maximum score. Amid criticism and mockery from most critics, one voice rose up, different and compelling Roger Ebert. He rated Tron 4 out of 4 stars, the maximum score, and called the film a dazzling display of light and technology, a visual experience unlike any before. While many other critics considered the film cold, lacking emotion, merely a pile of computer effects, Ebert saw the core Tron did not need to tell its story through long dialogue or complex psychological drama. It spoke through images, neon grid lines, the streaking light of the light cycle, shimmering disc battles. It was a film designed to be looked at, to be felt with the eyes, not only with ears or the heart. Ebert, with his sensitivity and long-range vision, recognized the pioneering value of Tron as early as 1982. He understood that this was not an ordinary film, but a leap into the future of cinema, that praise amid a storm of criticism became an important anchor that allowed Tron to gradually be reassessed over time. 7. The soundtrack almost belonged to another rock band. When thinking about the sound of Tron, people usually immediately remember the legendary electronic soundtrack by Wendy Carlos. But few know that initially Disney had invited another famous rock band to compose the soundtrack Supertramp. The British band, with hits like The Logical Song and Breakfast in America, was contacted first, promising to bring a progressive rock sound that was deep and full of surreal colour, very fitting for Tron's fantastical digital world. However, midway through, Supertramp withdrew due to scheduling and personal reasons. Disney quickly turned to Journey, the American rock band rising to the top with Steve Perry. Journey recorded 2 songs, Solutions and Separate Ways, worlds apart for the film, bringing strong, accessible rock energy. Those tracks helped make the Tron soundtrack more appealing to general audiences. If Supertramp had stayed, Tron might have carried a more complex, more abstract musical layer closer to the artistic spirit of Wendy Carlos. Even so, that change inadvertently created a soundtrack perfectly balanced between cold electronics and energetic rock, a combination that remains unique to this day. 6. World of Tron. The first Tron experience at Disneyland, 1982. In the same year the film was released, Disney quickly transformed a tunnel segment of the People Mover in Tomorrowland into World of Tron, the first real-world experience to bring audiences into the digital world. As the train slowly rolled into the dark tunnel, suddenly blue and orange neon lights burst on everywhere. The deep, cold voice of the MCP echoed from hidden speakers threatening, "All programs must obey the Master Control program." Along the walls, model light cycles ran alongside the track, trailing streaks of light, creating the sensation of being pulled straight into the game. The effects were simple, just lights, sound and moving models, but for children in 1982, it was a real shock. Many children exited the tunnel with eyes wide open, hearts pounding as if they had truly stepped into the grid of Tron. This was the predecessor of the later Tron Light Cycle Run ride at Disney parks. World of Tron existed for only a few years, but it brought the digital world from the big screen into real life, allowing millions to feel the breath of the film right in the middle of Tomorrowland. A small detail, but enough to prove Tron was not just a film, but a reality that Disney wanted us to touch. T. From box office failure to the National Film Registry, in 1982, Tron was invested with $17 million, a large figure at the time, with the expectation of becoming Disney's next blockbuster. Global revenue was around $50 million, not a heavy flop, but still below expectations compared to films of the same season, such as E.T. or Star Trek II. Disney quietly shelved the project, considering it another missed shot in the studio's string of unsuccessful science fiction films. However, Tron did not die. It lived again through worn VHS tapes and late-night cable channels. Millions of children of the 80s to 90s watched it over and over in dark bedrooms, damp basements under the blue neon glow of old TV screens. Endless grid scenes, the whizzing sound of light cycles and shimmering throwing discs became childhood memories without the need for grand movie theatres. By 2010, after nearly 3 decades, the Library of Congress placed Tron into the US National Film Registry, the list of works deemed culturally, historically and aesthetically significant to Americans. That decision recognized Tron not merely as a box office failure, but as a turning point, the first film to truly bring audiences into the digital world, paving the way for CGI games and later pop culture. From a stumble, in 1982, Tron quietly became a legend, proving that sometimes failure in theaters is the beginning of immortality. 4. Pac-Man cameo, hidden but perfectly logical within the system. A small detail that makes Tron fans smile endlessly on Sark's control panel, the villain in the digital world. The image of Pac-Man quietly appears. Not a random coincidence or a simple wordplay, this Easter egg is completely logical. Early 80s arcade games existed within the same machine universe. Pac-Man, with its yellow dot mazes and familiar waka waka sound, is also a digital program, part of the data system ruled by the MCP. It is like a reminder every arcade game could be pulled into Tron's grid. Behind-the-scenes accounts reveal that this detail was added to honour the arcade world, the primary inspiration for the film. At first, few people noticed, but when the Tron game was released, that Easter egg gradually became legendary. Decades later, fans still dig it up, take photos and share. Pac-Man is in Tron too. A small detail, but enough to blend the worlds of film and games, reminding us of the golden age of arcade machines. 3. Disqualified from the Oscars because using computers is cheating. In 1982, Tron should have been a strong contender for the Oscar for visual effects. The neon lines, endless grids, light cycles, and disc battles were all technical breakthroughs. But the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences disqualified it outright. The reason they considered the use of computers to create effects to be cheating invalid, because it was not entirely manual. That decision shocked the filmmakers. What they saw as the future of cinema was treated as a violation of outdated rules. 4 decades later, nearly every blockbuster relies on CGI from Avatar to Avengers. The decision to exclude Tron is now regarded as one of the most outdated mistakes in Oscar history, a moment when the Academy failed to keep pace with the times. Without a gold statue, Tron still quietly proved that sometimes true value does not lie in awards, but in opening the path for an entire industry. 2. Almost had the legend Peter O'Toole in a glowing suit of armour. Imagine a moment Peter O'Toole, the legend with deep blue eyes and a resonant voice from Lawrence of Arabia, standing in Tron's neon world, wearing a glowing suit of armour, holding a light disc. He very much wanted the role of Tron, the heroic program warrior, rather than the villain Dillinger/Sark. O'Toole saw in that character a nobility, a poetic fighting spirit, something he had expressed brilliantly throughout his career. But Disney worried would audiences accept a classical British star with aristocratic bearing in the role of a digital warrior. They feared the image would feel out of place amid the youthful, blazing neon world. In the end, the studio politely declined and chose Bruce Boxleitner, a younger, more energetic American actor. O'Toole accepted the villain role, still excellent, but not the Tron he had hoped for. At the same time, Debbie Harry, lead singer of Blondie, an 80s rock icon, auditioned for the role of Laura/Yori. She brought alluring charm and her distinctive husky voice, but was not chosen. Debbie later moved on to Videodrome by David Cronenberg, where she continued to shine in her own way. Jeff Bridges, with his likeable smile and approachability, became the perfect choice for Kevin Flynn, an ordinary guy stepping into the digital world. 1. Tron had no chance to win at the box office in 1982. Disney shifted Tron's release to the summer of 1982, a disastrous decision. The film had to face Hollywood's deadly lineup, The Secret of NIMH, with its touching story of intelligent mice, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, igniting the Trek fan community, Poltergeist, terrifying audiences with a haunted house, Blade Runner by Ridley Scott, delivering a dark future of drizzle and gloomy neon, and especially E.T., the extraterrestrial by Spielberg, the film that swept the market with the image of the boy Elliot and the warm, tearful alien. E.T. did not just dominate the box office, it captured audiences' hearts, drawing families to theatres week after week. Tron, with its cold digital world and rigid neon, was seen as alien and lacking human warmth. Its revenue sank amid the E.T. phenomenon, but time changes everything. Tron lived again through VHS tapes, late-night cable screenings, and later deep technical analyses. From a box office failure, it gradually came to be recognised as a pioneer, paving the way for CGI arcade games and the digital culture we live in today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next video.